It's great to talk to you, Mr. Loach, and thank you for making such a wonderful film.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thanks very much, David.
So,
I answered to Ken, really, rather than Mr., but that's okay.
okay, well, it'll be Ken from now on.
Right?
So, so, I mean, you've made a film that is rooted in a very, very specific part of the world and community and time, but it speaks so broadly to what we're seeing all around the world in terms of um, the story that combines this, post-industrial landscape where people are desperate and feeling lost on one hand, and then refugees who are also lost in their way, and you put them together in a way that so many of us can relate to. Could you talk about how this story, this came about?
Paul Laverty, the writer, is a central figure always in what we do, and the film is Paul's if not more, as much, if not more than me. We've done two films with the producer Rebecca O'Brien in the northeast of England, which is a very special area. It has its own dialect, it has its own long history, and it was based on old industries, shipbuilding, steel, and coal mining. They all closed within a few decades of each other towards the end of last century. And the coal mining is very, the villages of mining communities are very precise. They're in the countryside. The pit was the dominating feature with its wheel and its winding wheel and the shaft. The terraces of houses are all working in the pit, and then countryside. So when the pit shuts, so much else closes. Shops close, some people leave, the infrastructure shrinks, community centers go, churches go, fewer doctors, fewer schools, and the community was abandoned as a political decision by the Thatcher government, the right-wing government, and endorsed later by the Labour Party, which is meant to be the party of the working class, but is now a party of the right. The great struggle to keep the pits open was lost by the miners in the 80s. It was the period of Reaganomics and the Chicago economists and Margaret Thatcher and the neoliberalism that after this swept Europe. The cost of labor was devalued, easy to exploit, and anything that hindered the big corporations and big employers from making money, profit, that was swept away. So it was raw capitalism like the 19th century, as near as they could get it. The welfare state that we'd established after the 45 war, that was dismantled. And the pit villages, as I say, were abandoned. And there were two attitudes emerged. One was anger, bitterness, and looking for scapegoats. The other was the old tradition of solidarity and internationalism and a socialist tradition of mutual support. We thought this is a story we have to tell because it's as you say, it's a precise example because of its geography and because of it was the decisive battle that opened the way for this extraordinary exploitation that we now see. How do we tell the story? Paul heard what happened when the refugees from the Syrian war arrived in that area, in those villages. They were sent. That area had more refugees per head of population than anywhere else in the country because they were out of sight. Property was cheap. The right-wing press would not forget them. The only people who have to deal with them were people who had nothing themselves. But never mind that. The initial response was hostility, and the question was, will the two communities live together? Will the old tradition of solidarity dominate the bitterness and rage that can lead to racism? And the issue's in doubt right to the end.
Right. I mean, so the conditions, the poor economic conditions led to the refugees being there.
Yes.
I understand that your process of developing the film is you're working almost in the way that a good documentary filmmaker will work, and observing and learning from the people there, and actually including the people there. So there are a mix of professional actors, but a lot of real refugees and real locals. So could you talk about that?
Yes, I mean it's written by Paul. I mean, we talk about the idea, but Paul writes a first draft, and that's a solitary job. So the characters are Paul's, and the dialogue, and the narrative, and the outcome. But we talked about it, and we obviously continued to talk about it. But it's important I say Paul does the writing, not me. And yes, we try to set ourselves a high standard, a high bar, that you look at the people on screen and you have to believe these people are the people in real life. You're watching something that could just unfold in real life. And that demands certain ways of working. You can see the camera is so precise and forensic. You can see the pores of people's skin. You can see their hands, what kind of work they've done. You can see how their bodies stand. You can see their social background, very simply. So yes, and people with that life experience bring all that to the screen without even thinking about it. There's one really experienced actor, and that's the guy who plays Charlie, who's a brilliant actor, but he's from the locality and absolutely bedded in that tradition.
Trevor Fox.
Yes, Trevor Fox, a lovely man, fine actor, but a humble man, and was completely integrated into the group. The others are the stand-up comics. There's musicians. There's people just leading ordinary lives. There's somebody who runs the karate in the not the karate. When you sing a song to the words on the screen. Karaoke. Yeah, he does that. And one of the older women was active in the miners' strike. And the people, everyone is from a few miles of that village. TJ was a fireman, but he'd been in the previous two films. We knew he had an emotional depth and could do it. And the audition process is very long period, and we tried little improvisations, not from the film, but something different. And he's got an emotional depth, and he's a lovely man, brilliant man.
Dave Turner.
Yes, Dave Turner, and the Syrian families are the Syrian families. Yara is an actress from the Golan Heights, which she says is occupied Syria, which it is. Right. And but she teaches drama now, because obviously there's not a lot of opportunity to act in films there now. And we saw 30 in Syria on Zoom, and 3 came over, and she was the one. I mean, it's a rather long answer, but it is all about finding people who will be vulnerable, who we know have the capacity to reveal the depths of their genuine feelings, and to create a fictional situation.
I mean, Emelin Theatre, who is extraordinary, who plays Yara. She's so moving. You feel for her, but she also embodies a kind of hopefulness. I mean, somehow you find hope in a very
Well, the central relationship is, with her and TJ, and she inspires him, because he's a man who's depressed. I mean, he knows that he was a militant young man. He saw the defeat of the strike. He knows the politics. He's been a community activist. He's seen that fail, and he's living a life of despair, and abstentionism from any struggle. and her hope, her inspiration, her determination. And she's worse off, they're worse off than anybody in the village. I mean, they've lost family members, they got loved ones in prison, suffering God knows what. They've been through torture, they've been through collapse of their homes, destruction, lost everything. If that young woman can keep fighting in those circumstances, TJ can't justify his own despair. And that relationship and how gradually that happens. And it goes backwards and forward. It isn't an easy transition. But at the end, he walks out and then we've seen the end scene. I mean, her father's has died, been tortured and God knows what.
Yeah.
And he thinks and he's there for her. And then at the end, they march together with the other Syrian families in a great march of solidarity. It's a huge event. That the mainstream media never cover it, but the Durham Miners Gala is a great event. I mean, 200,000 people across the country, different trade unions, never reported, and that's real hope because that's strength, and that's people forget. I mean, working class people can turn the switch off, stop everything.
Yeah.
They don't need to be exploited to do that.
Exactly.
The exploiters need workers to make their profit. Workers don't need to be exploited. So that's our strength, and that's our hope, and is that solidarity.
I just have two more things to ask. One is a sort of quick question, but the Old Oak itself, that was an actual bar with that name that you found?
No, that was Paul's title. And it's a pub. It had been a pub, but we had to revive it. It had closed some years before. And we had to restore it as a pub. And then, the back room becomes the back room of memories and the past. But the pub is the Old Oak. Obviously, the oak is the traditional tree of England. The Navy, Henry VIII's Navy was built of oak, hearts of oak. The oak is this strong, permanent, durable, will last, stand forever. So that has a tradition of being identified as the national tree almost. And then it's not the royal oak. There are lots of royal oaks, but we chose the Old Oak for obvious reasons.
Right. So the last thing I want to ask, it really feels like with the movies 𝙀𝙊𝙀𝙀𝙀 and Sorry We Missed You and this, you've created a kind of trilogy about the dehumanizing conditions that so many people feel around the world. So I just want to know like what that has been for you and where you look for hope for the world in these times.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a hope we have to fight for. My God, it's a fight because the opposition is very strong and looks stronger than it is. I mean, they're defending a crumbling economic system. But I think one thing we need to realize is that it is all the things we fear: climate disaster, aggressive foreign policies that lead to war, poverty and hunger at home, and exploitation by employers of low wages and casualized labor. They all have the common denominator is corporate power. Corporate power decides, no, we can make money out of fossil fuels. Corporate power demands markets to sell their goods, and their politicians then have to pursue spheres of influence, and that leads to conflict. And of course, it is the employers who demand cheap labor. So one thing we have to realize, all these issues have the same fundamental cause. And if we realize that, then we can integrate our political consciousness into that struggle. The other thing is that their tactic of a search for scapegoats, the scapegoats of blame the immigrants, don't blame the system that's collapsing, I mean, we have appalling public services now. Our health service is collapsing. Housing is a huge problem, so on and so on. Poverty, hunger. I mean, I grew up after the war, and well, I grew up during the war, born before the war, and we were there wasn't much money around, but nobody starved. Everybody had food. Everybody had somewhere to live, even though we needed lots of new houses. There was a sense of sharing. There was a sense of having won that war as one people, and the effect of that victory of neoliberalism is to divide us. And the current argument now that we have, and I guess you have too, is about division, scapegoats, blame the immigrants, build a wall, sink the boats that are coming illegally, send them to Africa because we don't want them here. And that leads to racism, and they fan the flames of racism. Both parties, we don't have a party of the left now. Both parties, right-wing parties. And that's so transparently not true. And we have to fight that. So find the common denominator of corporate power. Link up and solidarity.
Okay.
That's our hope. Anyway,
well, that's hoping. Well, thank you so much. I mean, and you did put a human face on that, and gave us some hope with the end of this film. Well, but thank you again.
Oh, they were lovely people to work with, and my God, they gave us so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your taking the time, and good luck with the opening of the film.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay.
And to you too.